it's Leslie with Joleelee Creations, and today we're making the Book Bestie by Carolina Little Stitches. This is her first pattern, and she did an amazing job creating it. She gave us 3 flap options. This is the classic button flap. She did a round flap and a round tab option. There are also 5 sizes for a variety of uses. This is the medium size with a cork flap and a quilting cotton exterior and interior. I interfaced the cork flap with fusible fleece and I omitted the Decaville light. For the cotton pieces, I used a woven interfacing and fusible fleece. I also have a button and a small piece of elastic, and that's all you need to create this pattern. So let's get started. Okay, first we need to go over our pieces. I have a piece of elastic. I have my button, the name tag if needed, have our exterior flap and our flap lining. We have 2 exterior pieces. We have 2 interior pieces. A quick thing I would like to mention when cutting out your exterior pieces is to note 2 things. One is the direction of the fabric that you would like the front to be, as if it's a directional fabric, you'll need to pay attention to that. And also which way you would like your book flap to open. So as the pattern's written, it opens to the left side. If you'd like to open it to the right side and it's directional fabric, then you'll kind of need to work yourself through that. We want to start by marking all our center marks. Go ahead and do a quick clip on those. To start, we want to work with our exterior flap. If you are uncomfortable with the turning points, you can draw your seam allowance on the wrong side of the exterior. So you just go ahead and use your grid ruler or ruler of choice to go ahead and mark out that seam allowance. That'll give us nice crisp turning points to be able to turn precisely at every corner. Now that I have our seam allowance marked out, we want to take our elastic. We want to baste it at 1/4 of an inch at the center mark of our flap. I do want to mention here that it's not necessary to backstitch a ton over your elastic. I did backstitch quite a bit on my other flap and it did cut through the elastic a little bit and kind of lost the elasticity. So just do a couple stitches over that to hold it in place. Now we want to take our flap lining. We're going to place it wrong sides together with our exterior flap. Add a couple clips to hold it in place. And we can stitch along the markings that we made for our seam allowance. In to hit that needle precisely at every corner and pivot. If you're working with a bulkier flap on a domestic machine, you may want to consider leaving the fleece out of your seam allowance. now we need to cut our seam allowance down. You can use pinking shears if you have them, or you can just make sure to cut these corners tight. I do like to leave a little bit of seam allowance on the sides to have a flatter top stitch. That'll keep the foot from falling off the edge when top stitching. Sometimes it can get a little uneven, so as long as these corner points are trimmed pretty tight, we also want to leave our extra elastic there. Now we can go ahead and turn our flap. Pushing out all the corners. If you're using all cotton, you can go ahead and give it a really good press with the iron. If you're using a vinyl or thicker material, just go ahead and place a couple clips. And now we're going to go ahead and top stitch at 1/8 of an inch around the exterior. We can also baste our flap closed. Go slowly once you get to the corner mark. You're going to pivot and turn. So now that our flap is complete, we need to take our exterior back. So if you have a piece that you would like to be your front and your back, we want to choose the back piece. We're going to mark our center marks with our back flap, and we're going to baste our flap right sides together to each other. And I do want to back stitch a couple extra stitches right at the edge of our flap in our exterior, and that'll give it a little bit more security once it's opening and closing. Now we want to take our exterior front. We are going to clip it right sides together with our flap piece and our back. And we're going to stitch along the sides and the bottoms, leaving the top open. threads at our corners. So now we have our front stitch together. We need to stick our hands on the inside and fold open our seams. We want to line up our seam down the bottom and our seam down the side and push the butterfly open together. I'm going to give that a clip. I want to make sure this side is open all the way down as well. I'm going to do the same for the other side. Butterfly open the seam, pressing it open. Along the bottom. Stick our hand inside, butterfly both seams, and push the two seams together, lining up the bottom seam and the side seam together. We want to make sure that the seams are lined up together at least 3/8 of an inch into our hole. So even if it's lined up at the edge, we don't really want it to be off center because that'll make our box corners crooked. So we need to make sure that these seams are lined up at least where our stitching goes. Just line that up flat, and now we're going to stitch our corners here. We want to make sure to backstitch that well. I'm going to do the same for the other corner. I'm going to clip off a little bit of the excess. Now we want our side seams to stay open, so I'm going to add a clip to those and set this piece aside. Now we need to work on our interior lining piece. We want to do the same thing, right sides together. We're going to stitch around the exterior sides. And when we get to the bottom, we're going to leave about 4 or 5 inch gap on the bottom to be able to turn through. Clip our excess thread. And we need to push our side seams open. Now we need to do the same thing for our corners. Stick our hand inside, fold open our seams, and pinch them together. Lining up the side seam and the bottom seam to make a little triangle. Back stitch well. And repeat on the other corner. And now we have our lining with a hole in the bottom to be able to turn. Now we need to take our exterior and we need to turn it right sides out. And now we're going to stick our exterior inside of our lining so they're right sides together. It's going to be a tight fit, and it's okay if the bag's crumpled on the inside. We want to take our lining seams, butterfly them open with our exterior, and we want to line our two seams up together. And again, we want to make sure that the tops just aren't lined up, that they are lined up deep into the bag where the stitching goes. Because once we stitch at 3/8 of an inch, where we want it to be lined up is going to be down here. So just make sure it's lined up down into the bag and give it a clip. We come to the other side. Line up our seams here. And clip to hold in place. Now we want to take our center marks. And add a clip on each side of our center mark. Do the same for both center pieces. And then kind of work our way around, lining up that interior with our exterior, clipping as we go. You may need to kind of manipulate your bag to make sure it stays lined up. If you have too much excess up top, you may need to give your lining a tug from our bottom, or our exterior tug through our lining to tighten it up a bit. So now we're going to stitch around the entire exterior, making sure to backstitch at the start and stop. And that's the perks of having a cylinder arm, is that we can just slide it right on over. Unclipping as you go. Hold your butterfly seams flat so it doesn't bunch up. If your seams slide apart, just slide them back together. Kneading back up with the stitches where we started before. You just want to backstitch well. So now we have our area top stitched. If you are sewing on a flatbed, you may find it easier to stitch from the inside of your bag, and that's perfectly okay. Whatever's easier, you just manipulate your bag the best you can. And now we need to turn our bag through our bottom flap, or bottom opening. So now that we have turned our bag, you can give it a quick press with the iron if you have any wrinkly spots that need to be addressed. We want to make sure we poke our corners out well. I'm going to quickly put a clip in the bottom of this opening here, and we do want to stitch that closed. But I want to put my button on first so that I can stitch that through the pocket opening. So I'm going to tuck this in. Roll your seams pretty good here, so we are going to top stitch that. So now we have our lining tucked in to the exterior, and we need to top stitch around. I'm going to make sure our flap is pulled out well. And we just want to be mindful of these seams here. You can use a key fob pliers, if you have those, to kind of squeeze down those edges, and that'll kind of reduce the bulk or spread it out just a little bit so we don't have as big of a hump there. Even on an industrial, we don't want to have unnecessary humps. So just give that a little bit of a squeeze, and that'll kind of soften up the fabric where the seams meet there. So we can add a couple clips to hold this in place. And when we top stitch, we do want to keep our flap up so that it doesn't, if we top stitch with it down, then it's just going to keep it closed. So we just want to make sure everything is pulled nice and tight. Now you can do one of two things. You can leave your tails long and we can tie them off once we're finished, or you can back stitch. I like to start in my side seam with my thread tails long, and I'm going to drop my needle right into the middle of that side seam. I'm stitching at a 4 stitch length for my top stitch, and we're just going to top stitch all the way around the front. Use a hump jumper if needed when you get to the thick seams. Have just a piece of vinyl that I've kept around for a long time that works really well for that. And now we're going to top stitch across the back of our flap, our exterior, and our lining. So we just want to make sure that's pulled tight as we top stitch across. And we're just going to meet up right back in that same hole in the side seam where we started. So when you get close, I'm just going to walk it in. Just going to walk it in right to that last first hole where we started. Pull our thread tails out long and trim those. So now we have top stitched around the front. We need to tie off our tails. So now we have our 2 threads on the exterior and 2 threads on the interior. We're going to take our exterior threads and thread them through the needle and up through the exterior, coming out of the middle seam. Coming right up through that center seam. So now our 2 threads are in the middle, and we're going to do the same for our interior threads. Coming up through between the 2 layers. So now all 4 threads are coming out in between the 2 layers. We want to knot these threads together. And now we need to thread these threads through the inside. And that'll leave a little bit longer tails on the inside of the bag, so it's less likely to come undone later. So if we were just to trim them really tight now, they're probably going to come untied. So we're going to thread all 4 through, and we're going to stick it down in the hole where the knot is, into the bag, and we want to come out in that side seam. Probably about 3 inches down into the bag. Pull those threads through. And now if you pull on the 4 threads that came through, it's going to hide this knot that we just tied in that side seam. So if you give it a little bit of tension on the inside of the bag, when we cut these threads, they're going to disappear right back into that side seam. So now we have about 2 or 3 inches of threads just stuck in the side seam, and that top stitch is hidden. So there's no back stitch. So now we need to add a spot for our button. So we want to take our flap, situate it in a normal position. You can also take your book and stick it in. That way that will give you your exact room for it. We want the center of our button to be at the bottommost part of our elastic. So with a little tug of our elastic, we're going to mark with our chalk pencil where the bottom of our elastic lines up. That way, once it's pulled tight, it'll wrap around that button. If we do to the bottom of the button, it's not going to have enough elastic to hold tight. So now we want to make sure that that is center on our bag. I'm just going to do a quick measure. And that's going to be the center point of our button. So because we left the bottom pocket open, now we can hand stitch our button on through the exterior, avoiding the lining. And now we just need to pull out our interior lining and close up the hole in the bottom. To do that, we just want to pull out our corners. We should have a crease from where it was folded earlier, where it naturally wants to fold. Put a couple clips in to hold it. Now when stitching the bottoms closed, I like to use the smallest stitch length on my machine, which is a 1, and that just gives me nice tiny little stitches that will hold everything nice and tight together. Back stitching really well at the beginning and the end. And now we can trim our threads. Can tuck our lining back inside, and we are finished. Thank you so much for making the Book Bestie with me. I really hope you enjoyed it. If this tutorial helped you out in any way, please hit the like button below. It'll really help out my channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe and you'll get notifications for other videos like this. We'd love to have you join our Facebook group, Creating with Joleelee. Thanks, we'll see you next time.